All right. Well, I'm Mike,
And I'm Caesar.
and
This is Sales Talk.
yeah. So what are we doing, Caesar?
This was our first episode, and I think one of the things that we wanted to kind of talk about was, our background, what we got out of sales, what we're doing in sales, and kind of give a little bit back to the idea of what we're, trying to promote with this podcast.
Yeah. So Caesar and I are both in the tech sales industry, right? So, for both of us, I would say sales really has changed our lives, our future outlook. So the whole purpose of this podcast is going to be Caesar and I just talking about our experience, how we got into sales, and eventually providing some tips to help new people kind of go down the path of getting into sales as well.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. I think, we're probably going to go through a lot of misconceptions, what, you see on TV sometimes or what you hear. And the idea with this is really to not necessarily squash all of those, but is to kind of give some clarity, some reality to it, as well as, talk about the things that we've done and hopefully, maybe, the mistakes that we've done, we can kind of let you know what to do better. So
Cool. So
Yeah.
I guess to start, how did you find your way into sales?
Yeah, I would say I got very lucky into how I first started. And so, out of university, I got into a company called Hilti. And, not in the tech space, but very much a tech-driven manufacturing company. But before anything, and, before I got on a phone or met any customer, they had a very extensive training piece, right? And I think that's really important when you get into sales is, especially if you're very new, is that, you want to really understand the training aspect to what they do, how they do it, and how they perform that. And
So did you join Hilti because, did you have a plan of getting into sales before you, were you looking for a sales job?
I was looking for a sales job.
Okay.
Right?
And was Hilti, you looked at Hilti because of their training specifically?
So when I got reached out by an actual recruiter, they kind of gave me the background. And so when we started talking, I said, look, obviously, as kids, you sell, I worked at Home Depot. So there is that bit of sales acumen that you get, but it's a bit different, right? When you're doing in the professional space, right? So, that's one of the things that she brought up during that conversation. And I remember distinctly her saying, look, they're setting you up for success, right? They're spending X amount of dollars before you even make money for them, right? And I thought that was something that I'm like, that was unheard of, right? Being fresh out of university, how are you expecting to do this for this company, right? And so when she explained that to me, I thought, this may be a great foundation. I can maybe get into other things, maybe stay in sales. So, before anything, like I said, I was 4 weeks pre-training, 3 weeks of training at their Tulsa, Oklahoma office, and then a couple of weeks of basically refresher, right? And the idea was you're not really going to be that 100% sales guy right away, but you're going to have an understanding of your product. And I think that's
what did Hilti sell? Sorry to cut you off.
Sorry, no problem. So Hilti is basically a manufacturing company for the construction industry.
Okay.
So they make tools, applications, fire stop, anything that you see basically at a big job site, somebody's using some type of application, whether it's, like I said, a tool or an anchor, anything like that. So Hilti provides probably the best in class, which was a great way of coming into a company, knowing that, you're part of at the time, a $4.5 billion company, right? Selling worldwide.
And you're selling the companies?
And I'm selling to the end user, right? So my particular space was not oil and gas, so that's what I sell now. It's actually more on the electrical, mechanical. So you're talking about people that are doing telecom, people that are doing plumbing. So there's different elements to what they do. I wasn't a generalist, so I was specifically selling to these type of companies, whether they be, a Black & McDonald, for example, or, just a single person that's doing it on their own, right? But they knew they need those applications for what they're doing, right?
Okay, so your first sales job was a company called Hilti.
Yep.
They did this intense, they flew you out for training,
Exactly.
onboarding. You were selling to people in construction. Had you ever sold to anyone in that industry before?
No, I have not.
Okay,
Even though at Home Depot, you get that odd person, but they came in knowing what they needed.
Okay.
I didn't really have to sell them anything.
Okay, so this is actually, I wanted to bring this up for people watching. You might have felt this way, but I felt this way in my first sales job. You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
You're selling into manufacturing. Were you stressed out? Was it nerve-wracking to figure out how to talk to people in an industry you've never been in, really?
Yeah, and I think one of the things for me was, I remember my first manager, and they basically had said, look, nobody's expecting you to be a like professional or understand, or sorry, a professional electrician or a telecom person, but they want you to be a professional or in understanding your product, right? So if you have a conversation, you know what your product could do, you know what it's meant to do or what it's supposed to do, and they're going to fill in those gaps for you, right? Nobody's ever going to second guess you because you don't know how something works for them, right? The intent is for you to dig with questions and understand what they're doing, maybe find some pain points, right? And then through those conversations, relay back, hey, I might have something that you want to try.
Okay, cool.
Because you're selling something that, somebody can put something in their hand, it makes it a little bit easier, but you start to build out those foundations so that you can actually start talking to those people, and then they can actually see some relevancy to what you're talking to, right?
Cool. So first sales job, Pilty, how long did you last? And
almost 5.5 years.
5.5. So was it what you expected? You loved it, or?
I enjoyed it for the customers that you gain, right? So like working for Hilti for 5 years, you built up a customer base at a very large territory. So being able to go on job sites, it actually builds up your confidence in being able to present to people, right? Also the idea that you're wearing multiple hats, right? So you can be talking to somebody on a job site, but then you can also be talking to a foreman, or you can go into the office and talk to the purchaser, or even somebody that's maybe drawing up schematics, for example, right?
Cool.
So you're learning on the fly a little bit, but you're taking on so many different roles that you're starting to learn what you haven't known before, right? So
cool.
Yeah.
That's
How about
awesome.
yourself?
Yeah, no, I mean,
Where did you start off?
Yeah, so Caesar knows where I started, but it's the point of this episode. I started at a company called CDW. So I actually was kind of in like desperation mode when I got my first sales job. So I went to university for philosophy. I was like a very average student, high school, did really like average, just mediocre. I got into a school called York, York.
Yep.
Very average university. I took philosophy. I didn't have a path at all. So during university, but I always worked. So during university, I was working at a bank as a teller, and then eventually I got like a good job where I was working in a collections call center for the Highway 407, which is a highway here in Canada. And I was just managing a team of collections agents. Did that through my last 2 years of university, and so I graduated. I went full time, and I kind of had this like come to Jesus epiphany where I was kind of like, this is depressing. If this is just gonna be, it was like I was like Jim from The Office. It was like a miserable job. I was at the time I was making 45 grand, which for a 20-year-old I was like, wow, this is pretty good. But then I was like,
you're seeing a little bit ahead.
Yeah, I'm like, this isn't gonna be good forever. But then I started to panic because, like I said, average university, didn't have a specialization. I wasn't an accountant, a lawyer, whatever.
Yeah.
I had a philosophy degree and call center collections experience. So this is where I kind of started to learn that sales was a much broader profession than I realized.
Yeah.
99% of the jobs I was looking at on like Indeed or Monster.ca or LinkedIn required like 10 years of experience. I was like, shit, like how am I going to get in anywhere? So I found this company called CDW. For those of you who don't know, CDW is, if you don't know, CDW is a huge IT company. So they sell like computer hardware, like these mics and cameras and computers we'd be using, and also software to basically companies of all sizes. Yeah. So CDW had an opening, and they still have this job. It was called a corporate account manager. And basically, bless you, basically you're a cold caller. So you get this job. It was an entry-level sales job. You have like this really low, it was like a 30 grand salary. And then the rest of your money was commission. So your whole job was to find companies who could potentially buy stuff from CDW, cold call them, and try to sell them stuff. So that was the first sales job I had. It was kind of, and when I say it was like a desperation move, is because I was kind of like, I don't want to do what I'm doing. Yeah. My friends were in sales and they're making better money than me, and they seem to be having a lot of fun. So I was like, I got to get into this by any means necessary. And CDW is the company that, made that possible. So I did that job for about 2 years, and yeah, that was how I got in. It was really, really hard, but it was actually a lot of fun. And I started to realize, like in that job, the possibility that like, hey, if you get into a sales job, you don't need to be just a regular office monkey kind of strapped to your desk doing the same thing every day. Like it kind of allowed me to do some traveling. We went on these cool sales conferences. Partners would take you for lunch and stuff. It was fun.
So let me ask. So when you went from a job that was $45,000 you're making, were you a little bit nervous that, hey, I'm moving to a job that has the $30,000 base?
Yeah.
And the amount of work, and I think that's where people don't know that there is a bit of fear sometimes when you're right. There could be a different base, but the outcome could be great, right? So
So yes, the short answer is I was very nervous. So like at the time I was living with my parents, but like I was in my early 20s. I eventually wanted to get a place and move out. So taking a 15 grand pay cut from a 45 grand salary, that's like what, 30%?
Yeah.
A lot of money. And I did have fear. I had the fear that I would suck at sales and I wouldn't make a lot of money. And in my first year at CDW, I think I just matched what I was making at my other company. So I was making the same, but I was working way harder, right? Because what I didn't realize is like, and a lot of people don't realize this, is when you're a new salesperson, you suck. You're just, you don't know anything. You don't know the product you're selling really. You have no confidence on the phones. That first year was like the learning.
And it shows through when you have conversations.
Oh yeah. I was a newbie, right? Like, but like in that year, I got to the point where I did start selling something, and that kind of validated that, okay, if I stick with this, I should be able to keep making more money. But yeah, definitely. When I first made the move, all my family said I was a knucklehead. Like they're like, you're crazy. Like,
why would you do this?
Why would you do this? You're setting yourself back. But you know, it worked out.
Excellent. No, it's good to. I think when it comes to commissions, and we'll probably get this at a later podcast too, is that, you know, and it goes back to the amount of work you put into it.
Yeah.
Usually, what it gets you what you get at the end of the.
Oh yeah, especially in the beginning too, because like a lot of salespeople will start a new sales job. Like I did this when I was at CW, and you see the top sales guy, and he's barely working, and he's making like $1 million every month, and you're like, oh, sales is so easy.
Yeah.
But when you're new and you suck and you don't have clients, it's going to be way harder.
Yeah.
But you do have like an element of freedom, which I really liked, right? Because like nobody's telling you like people tell you what you have to do, your quota and stuff, but they're not telling you what to do every minute of the day, or at least most managers won't. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think you start to probably that first year is really building up maybe a strategy or an understanding, but that's what they always say. Your first year is really that foundation piece when you're in sales or in any new job, and then your second year is really reaping the fruits of that labor that you did within that first year.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So like depending, and like we're both in tech, like we work for tech companies mainly, but depending on the company too, when you start somewhere, a lot of new salespeople, like I had this feeling, you get like eager to leave the company and get a better job.
Yeah.
But there's kind of this like balancing act with a new sales job where there's a point of diminishing returns, but there's also a point of, if I stay here long enough and build my book long enough, I'm going to be making a lot more money a lot easier. Yeah. So you kind of have to balance that, right? Yeah. Like in my case, a lot of guys at CDW were making like $1 million a year with a $30,000 base because they waited it out. Yeah. And over a 10-year period, every time someone like me came and farmed these 200 new accounts and built these relationships, every time someone like me would quit, they would get the accounts, and then they're just building their book, right? Yeah. And they're just making more and more money. So that's an interesting thing too, right? Because like I have had jobs I think I left too early, but then I've also had jobs where I was like, I should have left sooner. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyways, yeah. So that's kind of how I got into sales. I mean, you know, it's not like super glamorous. We just wanted to kind of give you an idea of where we started, because like 10 years or 8 years or whatever later, we actually crossed paths and worked together.
Exactly.
And Caesar started in a manufacturing sales role.
Moved into tech,
right? Yeah. And I started in tech. So I guess let's wrap up this episode here.
Perfect.
This is kind of just an intro of, you know, what sales is, how we got into it, and yeah.
Yeah, we'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, see ya.